seat and make sure my questions are real handy. But let's give them a nice warm welcome, shall we? And then here are water bottles, and let me get us, open it up for us just in case. Okay, so Richard, that one's yours. And that, speaking to the mic, because we want to hear every word, my friend. Okay? All right. Something that, well, good morning for starters. Good morning. It's great to be together. We had Richard with us a week from yesterday for our, Richard and Barbara, for our monthly men's breakfast. And so a lot of the questions that I'm asking will be repeats. I apologize for that, but I think that the others that were not part of the breakfast will enjoy to hear your conversation on some of those things as well. It's great to have you. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. One of the things that Barbara and Richard had shared with me as we were walking here to the sanctuary through the hall is they have these two treasures. The first one is a plaque written by a Colonel Dr. John, and I think it's McCrack. I don't see it doesn't finish because of the frame. But we've all heard of the poem Flanders Fields, correct? And so this is a poem that is full of history concerning World War I, and I'd like to read it to you, and then there's also a second piece to this that is very special. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow. Between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amidst the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields below. And they actually have a pressed poppy from the actual Flanders field here. Isn't that amazing?
That's over 100 years old.
My goodness. In some ways, I feel like I'm holding a military relic. And it's dated August 10th, 1916, and it's actually a poppy that's been pressed since then from the famed Flanders field. Okay? So, are we ready to go, Richard?
Have at it.
Have at it. You know, Richard is quite the guy.
Let me say something first.
Yes, sir, please.
This flower from Flanders Field.
Okay, let me, you take this one, and I'll take that one.
Roses are red, right?
Keep it close to your mouth, sir.
This flower from Flanders Field, none of us in here are old enough to remember this, but it was a very famous poem that was written by a Canadian officer following World War I. And as a child, I remember going to the American Legion and having this poem read, and I feel so fortunate that I have an original copy of this, and the poppy also. It commemorated the soldiers, sailors, Marines, all that were killed during World War I, the war to end all wars. Isn't that a saying? Okay, that's all I wanted to say about that. I just wanted to call it to your attention.
Thank you.
Because I'm so proud of it.
Absolutely, thank you. Well, to start off, we're going to get into your military service. when you enlisted and when you first received your commission. But I've just got kind of a big overarching question. What are your thoughts and your feelings about Memorial Day in general?
Well, it's a holiday that I'm proud of that I can participate. Those of us that were in any war, we have memories, and this kind of brings it to light, lets us remember, and maybe even bore some people to tell them about it. But to me, it's an important holiday.
Yes. Let's talk about your military service. What year did you enlist? What age were you? And then what age were you when you received your commission, and a little bit about that?
Well, the day after Pearl Harbor, a bunch of us kids, we were 17, 16, went down and tried to enlist. They told us, wait till you're a little older and get your father's permission. So I went to my dad, told him I wanted to enlist, and he says, you graduate high school, okay. Well, that wasn't a cinch. I wasn't a good student. But anyhow, I took it to heart, and when I graduated high school, I was 18 3 days before the graduation. Dad signed the papers, and I enlisted. I was 18 years.
And what was your job as an enlisted soldier?
March. KP duty, guard duty, and anything else that they could think of as nasty. I went in as we call them grunts, enlisted soldier, ground pounder, whatever. My last recommendation from my father, who had served in World War I, don't volunteer for anything. And I failed that order because one of the first things that happened, they asked for anybody that could type. And so I said I could. Well, I volunteered. But it was the smartest thing I ever did because I didn't have to pull KP duty, I didn't have to pull guard duty, I didn't have to do anything except type as a company clerk.
And then you later received a commission. And at that point, I guess we can go into your career as a fighter pilot. What year did you begin training as a fighter pilot? And how long or how soon after your training did you find yourself flying over the beaches of Normandy on D-Day?
Well, my history is such that I enlisted right out of high school, went in as like I said, enlisted man, took the test to become an aviation cadet. And following the tests, I passed them all right. So I had to wait my turn until they were building camps, they were building little airfields, everything was under construction. This is in the summer of '42. And they had to build everything because they had nothing but Army camps, which was just ground, and Navy, of course, too. So when I went in, which is right out of high school, I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for a month or so, and then since I had taken the test that I wanted to be an aviation cadet and had passed the test, they sent me to Shepherd Field, Texas. And normal training for, you've read about it, you've been there, you've done that. March, do pull KP duty and all that kind of thing. And after about 6 months, they started my cadet training, and I had to take ground school about 3 months. Am I talking loud enough or too loud? You're asleep back there. Anyhow, I started.
We don't say anything about that.
Oh, okay. We started our cadet training, and that was learn about instruments, aircraft instruments, that is. We learned a lot about marching, and we learned about what it was like to take orders, I guess. You start out, and you know you're the lowest of the low. But anyhow, our cadet training was very concentrated. Prior to the war, it took 2 years just to really get anywhere near an airplane. Now then, it took 2 months. And we started our training to learn about the theory of flight. Why does an airplane fly? What is the construction? Why is it this way? Why isn't it that way? And it was all a new life for all of us. We were 18 years to 26 years old.
And this is something that that you had mentioned last week when you were with the men. There was an acceleration. There was a fast-paced revving up for World War II, not only in building but also in training. How much time did you train before you found yourself over the beaches of Normandy?
Well, actually, Normandy, as far as I was concerned, quite a ways down the road, because I flew combat for 6 months before Normandy. And but let's see, to reconstruct, I was an enlisted man, finally got, they were having to build airfields and build barracks and all the other things, so we couldn't just say, okay, draft a guy, put him in a marching outfit and call him a cadet. It wasn't that simple. They had to train the teachers, they had to train, they had to build the field, they had to build the barracks, and they had to build the airplanes. So, we were not, the United States was not prepared for war. We weren't ready at all. The attack by the Japanese, there were people that knew this might happen, but it never filtered down. And so it had to start at the bottom and build up. So first thing I had to do, confiscate land, build barracks, build runways, build airplanes. Well, there's several lucky things that, I don't know, I guess I'm getting off the track here a little bit, but they had to, prior to the war, the big water project up in Washington, they were building this, I don't know what they called it at the time, but they had to build this big dam water system. The thing was, they were building it to take water from the whatever in northern Washington and pump it up to the top of this plateau and use the water for agricultural purposes and everything, all things like that. Well, the war started. Luckily, we had that project. What do you call that?
It's Grand Coulee. Yeah, Grand Coulee Dam.
Grand Coulee?
That's right, Grand Coulee. Thank you. Anyhow, they had to build this Grand Coulee the idea was to pump water up to the top of this plateau, which is a huge agricultural area, but they never had the moisture to grow crops. Well, now then, luckily, the dams were there, the water was there, and the aluminum, the bauxite, isn't that right? They make aluminum out of bauxite, is that? Yeah, and it was there, so they could build airplanes. The manpower was there because it had all these people coming from Arkansas and Oklahoma prior to the war, going up there to get jobs, to get work because of this big agricultural plant. Well, they finished the dams, and of course it was great. They had the water, they had the bauxite for aluminum, and they were able to build airplanes, manufacture aluminum. I'm not so smart. I had to read this out of a book to get the information, but that was the way we got into the war. The fact that we had this facility, all this aluminum and all this water for electrical power, and we sure needed it, and we needed it in a hurry.
You know, the idea of the pace of building up in preparation for the war, it brings to mind Camp Adair, which is just outside of Corvallis. You know, at the time, Camp Adair, when it was built, it was the second largest city in Oregon. It had a total of 1,800 buildings, and they built all of that in 6 months. 6 months. In fact, the soldiers told the story that because they built it so fast, it was all green lumber, and they would hear the buildings creaking while they were sleeping. Well. And so, just to kind of echo what you're saying. Now, let me transition us to Normandy, because what I first heard about this fellow named Richard Heymen was that at the age of 19, at the ripe old age of 19, he did his first combat flight over the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. And you just tell us about your experience, not only personally in the plane, but what you saw on that beach on that day.
Well, first of all, to get to that day, we trained mostly in California. We went to pre-flight training, which was 9 weeks, I think. Then we went to primary, where we actually touched an airplane, got to figure out how it worked, why it worked, and we even got to fly 60 hours. Most of us were farm kids or Depression-era kids. We had no background in flying, but we learned in a hurry.
Your microphone close to your mouth.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just think of it as a lollipop.
It won't fit. Anyhow, I'm sorry.
But now you're over the beach, Richard.
Oh, I'm not there for a long time. I'll try to speed it up. We flew, we got our training here in the States, and then we went overseas. We sailed over on the Queen Elizabeth. Yeah, we sailed over to England on the Queen Elizabeth. No escort. They figured we were fast enough we could beat any sub, so we didn't have escort to get there. We got to our base. We'd already had our training, about 6 months here in the States, flying the airplane. P-38 is what I had. So we got there in, golly, it must have been January, February, somewhere along in there. Anyhow, we flew missions over France and over Germany in our P-38s. I remember the first fellow that we lost, had the room next to me. His name was Kunstler. I'll bet his name hasn't been mentioned in years, but I remember because he was the very first man we lost in combat. Anyhow, we started flying missions immediately over France and into Germany. And we had nobody with any experience of flying combat, but we all found out in a big hurry what it was all about. Going up there and, I'm just a nice, peace-loving guy, and all of a sudden somebody's taking shots at me. And so that wasn't too enjoyable. We got our experience, I'd say, within 2 or 3 weeks. And just flying different types of missions. But our mission was to escort the bombers. They were going further and further every day until finally they got to where they were going as far as Berlin, which was over 600 miles from England. And that's an awful long time to sit on a life raft, you might say. Anyhow, we'd sit in an airplane for 6 hours flying that with no pressurization, and flying at altitude of around 25 to 30,000 feet. Not too many at 30, but 25,000 feet was a normal altitude. We were to keep the fighters, the German fighters, from attacking the bombers, because they were what was carrying the war to the enemy. And we escorted them we were in flights of 4, and we would weave back and forth on the bomber line, because the bomber's flying at, 200 something miles an hour, and we're flying at 300 and something miles an hour. And
Richard,
sorry?
Can I interrupted you.
Yeah.
You said something to us last week that has really stuck with me. And you said that while you were over the beaches of Normandy, that you could not, there was no enemy planes, and you couldn't release your ordnance on the beach because the men were running so fast.
Right. They were. Okay, I'll get to the invasion then.
Thank you, sir.
he's
I'm gonna get yelled at by my wife after all this. I know it.
Good luck.
That's good.
Good luck.
We flew these escort missions for about 5, 6 months, I guess, of escorting the bombers further and further into Germany till they got to Berlin, of course. And actually, one of the first missions that went to where they flew over Berlin, did their bombing, and then went on into Poland to recover. And I wasn't supposed to go that far, but I got in a fight, and the fight carried ways further than I wanted to go, and I had a long time getting back. Well, a long time. The flight was over 6 hours, which in a fighter is quite a while. And but I got in trouble a little bit, but it didn't last long. Somebody asked me a question, or was that a sarcastic remark?
No, just I think it was a little laugh.
Anyhow, our first mission over enemy territory was just see what it's like to get shot at. And I don't know how many of you have ever been shot at, but it's not a pleasant feeling. The flak would come up, and then you wouldn't see it until the shell exploded, and then it'd be a black cloud of about 6 foot in diameter or something like that, and it's all full of particles of lead and iron and whatever they put in a shell. And we learned about flak and how to dodge. I mean, it takes. We figured it out that it took so long for the gunner to use his radar or search pattern or whatever to figure out the altitude, figure out the airspeed, figure out where that airplane's going to be, and the length of time it takes to do all this, computing. And so then he fires a shell, and it gets up there where he's computed we're going to be. So we always, about every 10, 15 seconds, we'd make either a little climb or a little dive or turn. So if we had gone straight, the shell would have gone off here. We hopefully would be over here. And that was just our form of evasion. Not invasion, but evasion. Where did I get away from my time? What'd you ask me anyway?
I think they'd like to know what you saw when you were flying to the beaches of Normandy.
Okay. Normandy, when it happened, the ships, we had, of course, had been preparing for it all the time, and we'd been softening up the landing area as much as we could. We didn't know for sure where it was going to be, and that was part of the strategy, of course. But when the invasion actually started, they had all these troops in England, and and thousands of them, and they had these ships sitting in the harbors in the North Sea and in English Channel, and the troops had to go and get on these ships, go across the English Channel and make their landings. And when they were first landing, we could go in and strafe before the ships got there, but once the ships got where they were unloading the troops, we had to stop, and we went further inland and started strafing and shooting, because we were fighters, we weren't bombers, but we would use our ammunition that we had in our machine guns and cannon to strafe ground targets, so that the troops, as they came in, would have a little advantage, you might say. One of our biggest advantages at that time was the fact that the Germans couldn't make a move without asking Hitler first. Hitler was asleep when the troops first landed in Normandy, or the entire beach fronts that they went in, Cherbourg, Normandy, and the other areas, and they couldn't wake him. This is fact. They wouldn't dare wake him. Well, Hitler had planned. He figured that, okay, they're going to make the landings at such and such a place. I think in Brussels was one of the places that he had forecast, and that was it. So they had to wait, even though our troops were landing in Normandy and in Cherbourg and all along. They couldn't wake him for 2 hours because he was sleeping. Now, wasn't that a good way to run a war? We didn't know this, of course, at the time. But anyhow, that was the thing that slowed them down from reacting to the invasion itself, which is fortunate for us.
And a blessing for me.
Yeah. Have you guessed Barbara's from England?
By the way, how soon into your history were you folks married? Were you already married when he was talking about these events that he's mentioning? Were you already married or dating, fiancé?
She was a schoolgirl when I was over there.
When he was over there, I was 8 years old.
Oh, okay.
He was fighting the war with my father. My father was in the British Army. So,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah. I always tell everybody that the first time I saw Barbara, she was running along behind the truck saying, "Any gum chum, any candy yank? How about 6 silk stockings for my sister?"
That's delightful. Let's continue on. Favorite plane of all the planes you flew? Now you let me catch us up here. World War II, the Korean conflict, the Vietnam War, and then you retired, I suppose, after the Vietnam War. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then how many? I think you had said a total of 400 combat missions during your career. By the way, how many years total service?
32.
32, okay. And finished, yeah. And finished, came in as a buck private and finished as an 06, full bird colonel. That's one rank below general, folks. And so you have done yourself well. Favorite plane of all the planes you flew?
Well, people ask me that, and the only way I can answer it really is, whatever plane I was flying, if it got me home, it was my favorite one. I flew, do you all know what a P-38 was, what it looked like? Twin engine, twin tail, 425 miles an hour. Can you imagine? A year before, I had to ask my dad, can I use the pickup to take my girl to a dance? And there I am flying this airplane 400 miles an hour. Oh, boy. Anyhow, the P-38 was a lovely airplane. I really liked it. It was an honest airplane. It didn't surprise you. Whatever it was going to do or whatever you called on it to do, I know to this might sound odd trying to explain to you. An airplane is designed to do certain things. Well, once you get in it, you put it to all these these features that it's designed for, then you see what else you can do with it. So, and being a fighter pilot, that is just one of the greatest things. It's a wonderful occupation, believe me. I had a number of fighters that I flew, and like to say, if it got me home, I liked it.
How much of a transition was it for you to go from a prop plane to a jet plane?
Well, the training was terrific. I mean, they took people and trained them to train trainers, you might say. So there were a lot of little surprises when you get into a new airplane, but you've been trained so well to recognize, and it starts out with theory of flight. Why does an airplane stay air? Why does it do this? What causes it? And if you know these things, it gives you a leg up, Sorry.
No, that's great. Barbara, let's get you in on this. So which war was it that Richard was in that you were then his spouse?
It was the Vietnam War.
The Vietnam War.
Yes.
And so that was a conflict. That was a real conflict, and there were pilots that were dying in service to the country. How was it for you at home during his time away?
Well, I was actually too busy. I had 4 children to take care of, so we had been stationed up in New Hampshire, and he said, well, I'd like for you to be on the West Coast so that if I can get home during my time of duty in Vietnam, it would be closer. He never did get home during a tour of duty. But what I did, to keep myself busy, other than having 4 children, I read on Saturday mornings at the library to the children. I did grey lady work at the hospital, Port Hueneme Hospital, 1 day a week. And
did you say grey lady? What is that?
A grey lady is an aide to a nurse, an aide to a doctor, and that kept me in contact with adults because most of the time it was children. I didn't go out but twice in 9 months in the evenings, and one of them was New Year's Eve, and I went out with some ladies to see a local play, which was wonderful. Anyway, the second time, the second tour that he had, he had been stationed at Edwards, and he left me at Edwards. And that was a much better situation because I knew people on base, so I joined the choir, the wives' choir, and the, let me see what else I did. I'm trying to think. But the other thing that I did do, I flew over to Thailand to visit his base for a month. So that was really great. I enjoyed that. And he wasn't flying for that whole month. We then went to Hong Kong for a week. And I got back to Edwards, having enjoyed that. And the next time he came home, we were stationed to go to Germany. So I was kept rather busy. We were not allowed base housing at Edwards when the men were gone, so we bought a mobile home, I think like a 60-foot-long mobile home, from somebody who had gone through the same situation. And before he left, I sold the car to a major, and I sold the mobile home to the base commander for his mother-in-law. So.
There is a wonderful movie. It's a Mel Gibson movie called We Were Soldiers, And it's the story of the first major battle of American forces against the Vietnamese. And there is a piece in that movie that I've played here during Memorial Day services, that when the casualties began to mount up from that first battle, the Army wasn't prepared, and they ended up using cab drivers to deliver the Western Union messages. And it really captures the reality of being a soldier's wife, a service member's wife at home, and beginning to get these messages coming in, and oh no, am I next? And does any of that kind of bring up any emotion about the waiting wife at home for you?
None of that did for me, but I did have one episode or instance where I got a call from a wife of one of the men who was stationed in Richard's squadron, and she wanted to know what happened because he had taken off and had, let me see.
What he'd
you
done
know
is
better about that.
This pilot had a habit of pulling the gear handle up before the plane was actually flying, because it had a little trigger switch on the gear that if the weight was on the gear, the gear would not fold up. But when the air became light, as soon as when he got the handle up, bam, the landing gear was going to fold. And he had this habit, and he pulled the handle up, and as soon as the aircraft got a little light, got kind of bouncing along, doing about 170, 80 miles an hour, and the gear started collapsing, and it wasn't quite ready to fly, and it settled back down on the fuselage. And then he couldn't pull it up, and bombs were on the airplane, and the whole thing blew up.
Anyway, his wife called me from the East Coast. I was out on the West Coast, and it was the worst phone call I've had. It was 15 minutes, and she asked me what had happened. Well, Richard had told me what had happened, but I couldn't tell Charlotte what had happened. She was left with 8 children to take care of. So those things did kind of hit you close to home.
Oh, thank you. Richard, you have quite a bit of Army bling, as we call it, on your chest. Would you tell us a little bit about your citations, your medals, and those things, and maybe also what's your favorite one, or maybe the one that speaks the most about your service? I see a Bronze Star there for starters. Is that your highest award?
No, Silver Star. The medals for valor is the Congressional Medal of Honor is the highest one you can get. Then there's a couple of, anyhow, I've got the third highest one of these. It's called the, what the hell is it? I don't know. I got a bunch of medals anyway. And some of them are for valor, some of them are for just being in the service or being in a certain area. The thing is that with having the ribbons, it gives you a little privilege on getting out of the area sooner. Okay, you got your work. So yeah, it's kind of nice to have them, but the medals are secondary. I can't.
I understand.
Yeah.
Sir, let me ask you a question. You consider yourself a hero?
Oh, no. The heroes are out there in the cemetery. No, I'm not a hero. I was doing my job. I've had, 4 combat tours, I guess, or something like that. And no, it was my job. It was I was trained to do. I consider that I was a good pilot. In fact, I was a damn good pilot. But ribbons are incidental. You're kind of proud, though, when your fellow crew members recommend you for a particular award. It makes you feel good all over, you might say. But yeah, I'm glad I've got them. I've got the Silver Star is the biggest one I've got. That's the third highest you can get for valor. And
You remember the specific instance or event that earned you that
no,
award?
I really can't, because I had so many different things. I shot down a few airplanes. I destroyed some targets. Sometime when you're playing around on your computer, you look up, there's one that I can think of. There's others a lot more important, but there's one called the Doomer Bridge, D-U-M-M-E-R. If you ever messing around on your computer, you might find a little information about it, but it was a vital bridge on the Yalu, and I blew it up. So
Let me transition a little bit here. Now, we still have another few more minutes, and
I can really spread it out, can't I?
no, you're doing great. Richard, you are a Jewish man,
I am.
and so this was a question I asked you when you were with the men, and I want to repeat it. Number one, as an Army Air Corps pilot back then, the Air Force wasn't completely formed, so you were an Army Air Corps pilot. But nevertheless, as a pilot in World War II fighting Hitler and the Germans, you being a Jewish man, were you aware of what Hitler was doing with the Jews, and how did that affect you as an ally against Germany?
We knew what was happening in Germany. We had enough information. We knew what. My entire extended family, which was still in Germany, extended family, were eliminated. The entire family of my family lost them all. We knew what was going on, and not that this had any. When I was given choices, I specified that once I got my training done, I sure wanted to go to Europe. I asked for that. I don't know that it affected anything in what I got, but anyhow, I did ask to go to Europe, and luckily I did. Frankly, I knew what was happening. Everybody knew. And I wanted to destroy as many of the German fighters as I could. And I did. I got a few aerial victories, and I got a lot of destruction on the ground. And I volunteered for missions because I knew what was happening, and I don't know how else to describe it. Yes.
I think your words describe it well. How has your faith as a Jewish man affected your service?
Oh, I can't, well, I'm Jewish. I never denied it. I always say one of our boys made it pretty big,
We call him Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm not a overly religious person. I believe in my faith. And I don't go around Bible thumping.
Tell me about the prayer that you prayed. You mentioned how you prayed a prayer before many of your missions.
Jewish man wears his hat a lot more than a Jewish man, and I'm not an overly religious person, that's pretty obvious, but he will wear his hat, especially when he's praying, if he's really religious. But a prayer that your God probably said every day of his adult life, Shema Israel, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Blessed be his gracious name forever and ever. Amen.
My friend, can you say that? Don't take off your cap, please.
Hey, look, it's real too.
Can you say that prayer again? And can we all, with our hands, cover our head as we honor the Creator of heaven and earth together? And will you lead us in that prayer?
Put your handkerchief up if you care, on your head, if that's what you desire. Shema Israel. Sorry. Shema Israel, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Blessed be his gracious name forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
I want to tell you something before you interrupt me again. It's a pleasure
Kind of
for
reminds
me
me of home.
Me too.
It's a pleasure for us to speak to a group like this, even my little shiksa. You know what a shiksa is, don't you?
No, I don't want to know.
Okay.
It's a Christian woman.
Honestly, I appreciate being welcomed here and to your place of worship. I always have felt that I can worship wherever I am. And I do. And believe me, I have worshiped sometimes in the middle of a mission. Oh, God, help me out of this fix. Yes, I'll admit it. I've been scared. But you know, I've always been able to do my duty.
God bless you, my friend. Boy, I just don't know how to conclude our time. My goodness, what a tremendous honor to have both of you. You know, hearing your talk, I thought to myself, you know, this is history as coming from those who experienced history. It's not what culture is making of it, but this is what happened. And it's a wonderful thing, and we just honor you and Barbara so much for coming. Let's give them a hand.
We appreciate you.
Amen.
Thank you. One word. Amen.
Amen. Well, we have one. If you'll just remain here in our seats, we have one last video. But before we play the video, and the video will serve as our benediction, I'll say a prayer as we close. But I want to, again, bring the very verse that Cliff had brought with us this morning. And it comes from John 15, verses 13 through 17. It's actually in your bulletin. But it's all just wonderful teaching from Jesus. But the first verse, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. And so that is just, we've had a wonderful time here of hearing of your history and our history and your experiences. We've had a wonderful time of looking at videos and recognizing through taps and the pledge and so many things this morning of those that have given their all for us. And I, with you, have experienced the emotions of that. The emotions of that. But dear ones, let me offer you a challenge that all that we experienced this morning in the honoring and in the telling and in the music and all of it, let's resolve in our hearts not just to be affected emotionally, but let's resolve in our hearts to be inspired, that we would then go and that we would give of ourselves, just as we so appreciate and respect those who have given of themselves. Let's be those who continue that legacy and find how we can give of ourselves, even to the point of self-sacrifice for the good of another, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Amen? Well, we have a wonderful video here, and we'll just stay right where we are. It's just a beautiful video, and so enjoy it. If we can turn down the lights, and let this be our benediction. And will it show on this? Yes, it will.
Oh, great.
Thank you. And we want to start it from the beginning with the music. It's just a beautiful video.